Biopsychology. All right. So basically, biopsychology is all about how our bodies, how our biology influences our mind or influences the psychology aspects of our lives. So, starting with genetics. Human genetics, a theory of evolution by natural selection. Organisms that are better suited for the environment will survive and reproduce. Chromosomes are long strands of DNA. Deoxyribonucleic acid. This is why I don't like filming myself, but sequences of DNA make up the genes. They may have multiple alleles. A person's genotype is their genetic makeup, where their phenotype is all their observable inherited physical characteristics. So, for example, I potentially could have had blue eyes because my mother has blue eyes, my grandmother has blue eyes, my father's mother has blue eyes, my dad has like hazily eyes. So there's enough blue in the lineage that like I could have had blue eyes. Both my brothers have blue eyes. But I have the darker eyes that are brown. So I could, though, have genes for blue eyes. I could have some recessive blue-eyed genes. But the brown eye dominant gene is what's being displayed. That's the phenotype. That's what's being displayed. Okay? So your genotype is your whole genetic makeup. Everything that you possibly could have, but isn't presenting itself. And then your phenotype is what's presenting. So dominant and recessive genes. A cleft chin is a dominant trait. Okay, so I have a cleft chin and that's a dominant trait. Having a dominant allele, so B, dominant, from either parent gives you a cleft chin. So if you have BB, or big B, little b, or big B, that's going to be a cleft chin. You have heterogeneous versus homogeneous. That's big B, little b versus, or little b, big B versus big B, or little b. Now remember, this is general psychology, so it is very general when it comes to genetics. Okay, we're not getting very deep into things. Many genetic disorders are caused by the pairing of recessive genes. Most traits are polygenetic, controlled by more than one gene. So when people say, that can't be your baby because it's got red hair. All right, red hair can come out of nowhere. It's a recessive gene that, just kind of gets passed in the family lineage till finally it meets another gene. Okay, so you can't predict whether the child belongs to somebody based on eye color because that is polygenetic. There's lots of genes that are involved in that. The same as when we talk about schizophrenia or depression or anxiety. There's a lot of gene markers for those psychological disorders. And we can't necessarily pinpoint one. We can't say this gene causes schizophrenia, so if we can find a way to fix this gene, we can eradicate schizophrenia. No, there's more. They've identified at least 12 that have, at least 12. Maturation, this is sudden permanent change in a gene. Mutation. Mutation is a sudden permanent change in a gene. So, for example, my daughter has a mutation on the SCNA1 gene, and having that mutation creates a disorder called Dravet syndrome. So you can have mutations on certain genes. So gene-environment interactions. So you have what's called a range of reaction. Our genes are set the boundaries within which we can operate. So stimulating versus deprived environments. And a great example of range of reaction, so we start getting kind of into examples, is when you talk about IQ, and we'll learn more about IQ later in the intelligence chapter, but we talk about IQ, about 65% of the population kind of fall within this average normal IQ. Okay, that's about 65% of the population, 100 being the norm. Then you go up one standard deviation and down one. So you go to 85, then you go to 115, okay? And then from 115, you go to 130, and then 135. I'm sorry, 115, 130, and then above 130. And then 85 to 70, and then below 70. So it's 30, and then above 30, below 70. So when you have a range of reaction, so you have the genes. So somebody's, let's say, is born with a 100 IQ, okay? The absolute middle of the road average. If they have a stimulating environment, they can be pushed to maybe like a standard deviation above the mean to 115. If they don't have a stimulating environment, it can lower them down to 85. So that's the importance of having a stimulating environment when it comes to IQ. So, and a lot of things are that way. Even with growth, when we start talking about literally growth, if a person has, if they have a gene potential, a range of reaction, a gene potential, the boundary is set at 6'2", okay? But they don't have, they don't have healthy food, they don't have access to maybe proper medical care, and they end up only actually being 5'10", because they don't reach their full genetic potential for height. Genetic environment correlation, genes and environment influence each other bidirectionally. So for example, baseball players, I have that example because people say, are athletes just born? Yes and no. So for example, you have somebody who is very athletically predisposed, meaning they're kind of built to be very athletic. But if they don't get off if they don't learn baseball, they'll never know how to play baseball. Michael Jordan, amazing basketball player, he decided he was going to, try his hand at some other sports. And so he tried baseball. He did okay. He did better than I would do. Okay. He did okay, but he was not like, he didn't blow it out of the water like everybody thought he would, because he was, the all around top athlete kind of thing. But that's because he never really played baseball. Baseball wasn't his thing. Now, if he would have been raised in an environment where he was playing baseball all the time, he probably would have completely excelled at baseball. So you got to have that. If you have that genetic predisposition, you've got to then move into the actual doing of the activity, the actual learning of the skill. Epigenetics is how the same genotype can be expressed different ways. So individuals, for example, identical twins versus fraternal twins. So you can have a pair of identical twins and identical at birth. Even the womb nutrition can actually change some of the genetic structure, but identical at birth. But what gets tagged, or what gets, I guess you could say, what gets activated could change over time. So identical twins start looking less genetically identical as they age. But if we look at identical twins and fraternal twins, there's higher rates in similarities for identical twins as they age, preferences, things of that nature, IQ, than there are in fraternal twins. But when we study identical twins, we study them because we have this base. And because of that base, we can say, okay, here's this base of identical twin. This is where they start. So this is where they should be in their 50s. So why does this one have schizophrenia or this person have cancer when this one doesn't, when they're genetically identical? What in the environment triggered this person to have this disorder versus this one does not, when they were, for all intents and purposes, identical at birth? Genes are associated with temperament and also mental health disorders. We know we've identified gene markers for aggression, for anxiety, for depression, for schizophrenia. We've absolutely identified gene markers. Now, can we say this is exactly what's going on genetically? No. But we have identified some genetic markers that put you at risk for mental health disorders, but not if you have this is guaranteed. And that's kind of the same with the breast cancer testing they do. If you come back with results that say you have high genetic predisposition to breast cancer, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to have breast cancer later. It just shows that you need to be cautious in not activating or doing things that could worsen or push forward the onset of breast cancer, and also to get checked more regularly. All right. Remember, if you guys have questions, you can click over here. So the neuron structure, The nervous system has two kinds of cells, glial and neurons. The glials are kind of cleaning up after everybody, and neurons are sending your signals, telling what's going on. And again, this is just general psychology. So if you are in biology 211 or 210, I think it is, it does this, or even 101, or you're taking a neuropsych class, you're going to get pretty hardcore into this stuff. But for general psychology, just touching on it. Glial cells provide scaffolding the nervous system is built on. Neurons serve as interconnected information processors. Nucleus of the neuron is in the soma or cell body, and you don't have to label anything on the exam. You just need to kind of know what the structures do. Dendrites serve as input, so dendrites receive an axon sends. Ha ha ha. Dendrites receive an axon sends. Synapse is a space between the neurons where communication occurs. So there's a synaptic gap. All right, so neurons exist in a fluid-filled environment, literally and figuratively. It's like a little fluid-filled, and these are microscopic. I mean, we're talking itty-bitty. When a neuron receives signals that the dendrites gates open, and neuronal membrane, which allows sodium ions to move into the cell, making the cell more positive, then you have a threshold of excitation. So that's basically, it's preparing to fire. At peak of spike, sodium gates close, and potassium gates then open. Positive spike is your action potential, moves from the cell body to the axon to terminals. Axon potential is all or nothing phenomenon. The cell fires or it doesn't. Okay, so once the cell builds up enough, boom, it's going to fire. Okay, it doesn't fire just a little. Once it's prepared, it goes. What's an interesting thing about this is if you've ever gotten, ever taken coffee, and it's not coffee, and you go to get a sip of it, and you're like, you go to get a sip, and you're like, ooh, it's hot. Oh, that's not hot. But your first response may have been that it was going to be hot, so you thought it would be. The same as like somebody's like, acts like you're going to throw a ball at you, and you go like this. Well, of course you're going to flinch because your body's like, there's a ball coming at me. I should move. And so you move. Okay? I'm going to talk about those actually. Your inner, where are they? I don't have them on the slide, so let me go ahead and talk about them. You have your SAME, okay? SAME, same. You have your sensory equals afferent neurons, okay? And then you have your motor, which equals your efferent neurons, okay? Your sensory neurons, your sensory afferent neurons, these take in the information. So it's like, ooh, that's hot. Oh my, that's hot. So your motor neurons then kick back a message saying, well, move your hand. Okay. And it happens very rapidly. So the sensory is your afferent and your motor is your efferent neurons. All right, neurotransmitters and drugs. The biological perspective, physiological causes of psychological disorders, okay? So the biological perspective says that there is a physiological cause for these disorders, meaning that there are neurotransmitters that are not working properly, okay? Something's amiss. Something is awry. Something is not going right. So they have psychotropic medications which help to restore the neurotransmitter balance. So when we saw this here, the cell, when the dendrites are receiving messages, they receive a message in like a lock and key system. So there we go. There's our little dendrite. So here's our synaptic gap here, okay? And here comes our, let's say our opioid. Here comes our opioid. That is going to fit just perfect right there in that spot. It's just going to go right in there. It's going to fill up that neuron, fill up that terminal button, and it's going to build up, and then it's going to fire. Okay. When you have a drug can be an agonist or an antagonist. So if you have a drug, and let's say oxycodone, or what is that called? Oxycodone, which I think is right. But you have codeine. Codeine acts like a opioid. It acts like this neurotransmitter. Okay, so it's an agonist. An agonist acts like neurotransmitter. Okay? An antagonist, think of antagonizing. This blocks the neurotransmitter. Okay? So if you think about it, when a person is overdosed on an opioid and they give them naloxone, that is an antagonist to opioid receptors, meaning it will block the receptor, so no more opioid, no more firing, and the person goes, and it looks like people think it's epinephrine. They think they're giving them a shot of energy, but what they're really doing is they're blocking the opioid overdose, so that makes the person's respiratory system kick in again, so then they're suddenly able to breathe. So that's what's going on there. And these are actual little videos, so if you pull up the PowerPoints from the class, it's called class PowerPoints in your content, you can watch these little videos if you want to. I just can't play them on my screen while I'm recording. So, all right, Parkinson's disease and dopamine agonist. So dopamine, Parkinson's disease is having a lack of dopamine. So you can prescribe L-Dopa. It's called L-Dopa. And L-Dopa is a medication that can be used to help lower the symptoms of Parkinson's disease because it increases dopamine. Not to be taken unless it's needed, but we know that lack of dopamine is involved in Parkinson's disease. Too much dopamine is involved in schizophrenia, but we don't know that as in like for sure kind of thing. All right, depression is commonly treated with SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft. Individuals may vary in response to the drugs. That's why any of these drugs that are used need to be kind of used cautiously. So instead of just running and saying, oh, I'm going to take a whole bunch of melatonin because I want to sleep. The thing is, you have melatonin naturally in your body. And so you want to train your body to produce the melatonin because the more you take the melatonin, the less your body naturally produces melatonin and the more dependent you could become upon the melatonin. So that works the same with any of the drugs that replicate neurotransmitters. It's like, that's why if somebody's taking opioids recreationally, it takes more for them to get high because their body stops producing natural opioid. And then when they come off of it, they feel really depressed, a lot of anxiety. It's because their body isn't producing anything naturally, and it takes a while for them to get back to that set place. All right, questions? Okay. Yeah, you can email me questions for sure. That would be fine. All right, central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. The nervous system is divided into two parts, okay? Where's my picture? Why don't I have a picture? All right, let me get you a picture. All right, let's see here. Images. I like this one. Let's see. I need the peripheral nervous system picture. There we go. All right, this is a good one. Let's cut this guy. All right, here we go. All right, so you have your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is basically brain and spinal cord, and we're going to go over that. And then the peripheral nervous system, this is all of your outlying nervous systems, neurons stretching down to fingers, all the way down to feet. The somatic is conscious and voluntary, but I'm actually going to go over this with the picture. It consists of motor neurons, efferent, and sensory neurons, afferent. So I did put it on here. But motor neurons, efferent, sensory neurons, afferent. So let's look at this picture really quick, though, since we are here. All right. So we have the nervous system. This is a great way to memorize this. Nervous system. CNS, PNS, autonomic nervous systems comes down from the peripheral nervous system. Now remember I said the central nervous system's brain, spinal cord, okay? And there's a lot of bits in the brain, all right? But we're talking about the peripheral nervous system right now. So peripheral nervous system breaks up into the autonomic and the somatic. When you think autonomic, I want you to think automatic, okay? I'm writing with a mouse, yo, so sorry. Think automatic. These are communicates with internal organs, blood pressure, heart rate, breathing. These are things that are automatic in your body. Somatic nervous system, this communicates with sense organs of voluntary movements. So they both break down as well. Autonomic breaks down into sympathetic and parasympathetic, whereas somatic breaks down into sensory afferent and motor efferent. Okay? So types of neurons that transmit messages. So with autonomic nervous system, you have your sympathetic and your parasympathetic. Your sympathetic arouses you, that hypes you up, and your parasympathetic is what calms you down, okay? All right, and we're going to talk more about that for sure. So your autonomic nervous system, this is right here. It goes from peripheral nervous system, autonomic, sympathetic, parasympathetic. So your autonomic nervous system's involuntary internal organs, glands. You have your sympathetic preparing your body for stress response, parasympathetic returning body to routine. Your homeostasis is your equilibrium, all right? Your biological optimal levels. If you are thirsty, what do? Yeah, you go get a drink, right? I'm thirsty, I'm going to get a drink. That's homeostasis. Fight or flight response is where excessive energy, you have excessive energy reserves. There's also a phenomenon called freeze. So you have fight, flight, or freeze. Some people like freeze up. This is excessive energy, heightened senses. It's not that helpful in the modern world because like somebody cuts us off and we get really super angry. It's really not that helpful in society today because we don't really need to fight or flight that situation. And we certainly don't need to freeze up. So it's something that is used as a defense mechanism. So talking about the going into the central nervous system, got the spinal cord. The spinal cord connects the brain to the outside world. Top merges at the brainstem. This breathing, digestion, ends just below the ribs, not at the base. It's not all the way to the base. It's just below the ribs where the spine ends. It's organized in 30 segments, which correspond to vertebrae. Some sensory messages are immediate. You don't really need, you're talking, this is a reflexive loop. You don't really need to have, moving your hand from heat. It's just a reflexive reaction. You don't really need to think about it. It's not like, that's really hot. I think I'll move my hand. Like, you don't really need to think about it. It's just reflexive. You just kind of automatically do it. The lower the spine damage, the fewer functions as injured individual loses. So the higher the spine injury, the more functioning the individual loses. Your cerebral cortex is the uneven surface of the brain. And again, this is general psychology. This is GP. All right. We're not going into great detail. It's just kind of the basics of the brain. If you are going into psych, I know one of you had emailed me and telling me that psych was your thing. If you are going to psych, highly suggest that you take a neuropsych course, just because psychology is moving very quickly and rapidly into the direction of the bio. It's very strong. All right, so cerebral cortex, the uneven surface of the brain patterns of folds, bumps known as gyri, and grooves called sulci. So again, this is why I don't like being recorded, because I'm sure I said it wrong. Sulci. Latitudinal fissures. These are deep grooves that separate the brain into two hemispheres. Most prominent sulcus Lateralization is specialization or functioning in each hemisphere. Left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. So my left side controls my right side, and my right side controls my left side, okay? Corpus callosum is that thick band. So, you've got your two hemispheres of the brain. Oh my gosh, you can't draw. And you've got this thick band in between. This is the corpus callosum, okay? Split brain patients, I can mention that really quickly. There's a little article in your text. I wrote that there. It's an interesting phenomenon. When individuals have severe seizure disorders, they will split the brain. Let me get a picture of the brain because I can't draw one. All right, there we go. All right. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, so realistic. All right, new. All right, so here's a picture of the brain. So when we look at this guy, right here in between here, that's the corpus callosum. So when they go to do a separation of the corpus callosum, they separate this band that's between here, okay? But they leave a little bit at the base. This is the cerebellum right here. So they leave a little bit at the base. So there's a wee bit connected. But the reason they do this is because if someone's having a severe seizure disorders, the seizure may start here, and it kicks electrical signals all the way across the brain. That's a tonic-clonic. It's a full-body seizure. Right here between the parietal lobe and the frontal lobe, the frontal lobe and the parietal, we have the motor strip going on here. So when you sever this area, then the seizure is less significant. It's not as strong, or in some cases it's actually stopped altogether. But the dilemma is that when you separate communication between the brain sides, it's as if your right side and your left side are now working independently of each other, and the person has to train themselves to make them work together. So for example, if I close this is my right hand, okay? So my left side's in charge of that, okay? Right hand. So if I close my right, okay, if I close this eye and I touch this like this, okay? And I put it down, and then I switch over to this eye and I look at it, I'm not going to know what that is just looking at it with this eye, because this side of the brain, this side of the brain did not get the communication. And I'm not going to know it if I touch it with this side. But if I touch it with this hand, I'm going to know what it is. Or if I look at it with this eye, I'm going to know what it is. Okay? So that is how that works. I hope I got it right. So basically, your brain is working independently of each other, like the sides are. So you have to learn to work. They have to train themselves to be able to make their body kind of work together as a team. Like the right hand may come over here and start writing something, and the left hand's like, no, I want to drink, like that. So they have to train themselves to, okay, we are going to write. This hand's going to be in charge of holding paper. This hand's going to be in charge of writing, until you get kind of a method. So it's very interesting to watch individuals working in therapy that have had split brain procedures. And it can be really tough. All right, so the forebrain structures. The forebrain is the largest part of the brain. That's going to be right here. Can I erase this? Yes, I can. All right. So the forebrain is going to be here. It's in the front. Right here, the forebrain. It's right in the frontal lobe. Okay, that's going to be in charge of executive functioning. It's going to have your thalamus, hypothalamus, pituitary gland. Oh, jeez, I stopped. I'm thinking of the 4 lobes of the brain. Stop, rewind. Just kidding. So let me tell you the 4 lobes of the brain first. You have the frontal lobe, temporal lobes, parietal lobe, and then you have your occipital lobes. So the occipital lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobes, and the frontal lobe. That's where I thought the PowerPoints were going. That's what I get for not looking at my PowerPoints. All right, frontal lobe. So those are the lobes of the brain. So come back with me. First, let's talk about the structures. So the forebrain is the largest part of the brain, consisting of 2 hemispheres, cerebral cortex, and numerous subcortical structures. Your thalamus, which is like your relay station, your hypothalamus, which controls the basically controls the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland was considered the master gland for hormone release, and then the limbic system. The cerebral cortex is the outer surface. It's associated with higher levels of processing such as consciousness, thought, emotion, reasoning, language, and memory. And again, general psychology. We're not going into great detail. I think your textbook has a picture of the brain that has all the bits and what they do, but not great detail for general psychology. There's 4 lobes of the brain. You have your frontal lobe, which is located in the front part of the brain. Here's a good picture. That's a good picture. Let's look at this one. I like this one. Here we go. New. Let's get that there. Slide it over. All right, so we've got the brain. We've got the parietal lobe, which is here, frontal lobe in the front, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. Temporal lobe is for hearing. I'm just going to go ahead and cover this while I'm here. Temporal lobe is for hearing. All right, so if you think about it, temporal lobe is right here, okay? So it's right next to your ears. That's easy to remember. Occipital lobe is for vision. All right, so it's for vision, for seeing, right here. And it's back here. That's why when somebody whacks their head really hard in the back, they get like little stars. The parietal lobe, this is for sensations, like feeling the wind. This is for sensations. And then you have the frontal lobe, which is your higher executive functioning, thought processing, impulse control. That's going to be the frontal lobe. All right, so just went over all the lobes. Okay, so other areas of the forebrain that we just talked about. Thalamus is sensory relay for the brain, in which all of our senses except smell are rooted. So if you think about it, if you hear something, it goes through the thalamus to root it to where it's supposed to go. Limbic system involved in processing emotion and memory. Sense of smell also projects the limbic system. Hippocampus. Now with the hippocampus, I want you to think of this. Elephants remember, but a hippo never forgets, all right? So a hippo never forgets. Then we've got the amygdala. This is involved in experiencing emotion and emotional meaning in memories. This is particularly strong, the amygdala. We start talking about like memories that are particularly strong, particularly strong memories. Then you have the hypothalamus, which regulates a number of homeostatic processes, including the regulation of body temperature, appetite, and blood pressure. So the case of Henry Moleson, he's a 27-year-old man who experienced seizures. In an attempt to control them, his brain surgery, they removed his hippocampus, which we know was not the way to go now, and amygdala. After surgery, he became much less severe, but he also suffered from unexpected consequences. He lost his ability to form new memories, and he was unable to learn new facts. So we know that the hippocampus is invaluable for memory. With damage to the hippocampus is going to cause damage in memory. So your midbrain structures are comprised of structures located deep in the brain between the forebrain and the hindbrain. You have your reticular formation. It's centered in the midbrain, extending up into the forebrain and down into the hindbrain, and it is important in regulation of sleep, wake cycle, arousal, alertness, and motor activity. The substantia nigra in the ventral tegmental area, the VTA, are also in the midbrain, and both regions contain cell bodies that produce the neurotransmitter dopamine and are critical for movement. So damage in these areas can cause damage in movement. Damage to the reticular formation causes damage in arousal, sleep, things of that nature. The hindbrain, located in the back of the head, looks like an extension of the spinal cord. You got the medulla, and this is where we go. Starts talking about going deep into the brain. So going up into here. Wah, wah, wah. All right, getting into some serious structures there. So medulla controls automatic processing, breathing, heart rate, blood pressure. If the medulla is damaged, you will die. You won't survive that. So sometimes we'll see an individual will have severe brain damage, but the basic brain area is still operating. So they're still able to breathe, the heart rate's going, blood pressure, but there's no cognitive, there's no higher functioning. It's just kind of the survival portions of the brain. The pons serves to connect the brain and spinal cord, involved in regulating brain during sleep. And then your cerebellum, which is called your little brain, and this is right here. This is the cerebellum right here. It's called little brain, and that's going to be involved in like movement, balance, and coordination. So you can read through the brain imaging on your own. I'm not going to spend time going over those here, but you know, you have your CTs, your PET scans, your CTs, your MRIs, and your fMRIs. The big difference here is that an fMRI is going to be kind of live action. It's like a video or like watching what's going on, whereas an MRI is going to be lots of multiple pictures going to be put together. And you have your EEGs, obviously. This gives you overall measures of brainwave activities. All right, then we go to the endocrine system. The endocrine system consists of a series of glands that produce hormones, which are secreted into the bloodstream and travel through the body. And we're going to talk about, when we talk about stress responses, we're going to talk about how when neurotransmitters are involved, like when you start to get angry, I'm angry, neurotransmitters are involved. But if you keep brooding, that's when hormones get released. And it's a lot harder to calm yourself down once the hormones get involved. Pituitary gland descends from the hypothalamus at the base of the brain. It's considered the master gland, kind of tells all the other glands, tells all the other hormones what to do, all the other glands in the endocrine system. The thyroid gland, this releases hormones that regulate growth, metabolism, and appetite. If a child is not growing properly or something's going wrong, they will check the thyroid. That's why they do measurements and weights, because you can have, there's a disorder called cretinism, which actually is a problem with thyroxine not being produced in infancy. So other major glands, you got your adrenal glands, pancreas, gonads. You can read about those. Adrenal glands are on top of your kidneys, secrete hormones involved in stress response, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Pancreas, an internal organ that secretes hormones that regulate blood sugar levels, insulin, glucagon. Oh, and when people, one of the reasons why they say you need to be low stress for if you have diabetes, it's because when you experience stress, your pancreas says, oh, we gotta kick in, something's going on. So that's why it's good to have lower stress when you have diabetes. All right, gonads, they secrete sexual hormones that are important in reproduction in both and mediate both sexual motivation and behavior. Oh, sadness. That's the end.